Hey everybody, this is Rydo, and we're back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. Today is Friday, December 1st. So we're into December, which only serves to remind me that I'm just not making as much progress in my side project now of making a smart on-air sign. I'm also not likely making quite as much progress as I should be as far as logging into these different days, but I almost wonder if you get these rewards even if you didn't log in on a specific day. I wouldn't kind of be surprised if that is exactly how this is playing out. Let's see. 2 new selection packs are here as far as new news. Who cares? Updated forbidden list, who cares? It's all just who cares to me at this point. Like, I've been playing Yu-Gi-Oh! For probably, we're approaching 2 years now, and ever since its original launch, and it just is really failing to feel important as far as the updates and stuff like this. Like we talked about in the last stream this thought that 83% of mobile games, and let's face it, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is as much a mobile game as it is a PC game, fail in the first 3 years. And for Konami, they have enough money that they could keep on doing Yu-Gi-Oh! Forever, and they have a big enough audience that they can keep on doing Yu-Gi-Oh! Forever. But if they were a brand new card game with a brand new fandom, which I imagine card games fail even faster than in the first 3 years, they definitely wouldn't be succeeding with the updates they have here. Although in fairness, if they were a brand new card game, then to reach the nearly 10,000 cards that are in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Card game in the course of 2 years would have been an amazing feat. Here we can see in the master pack alone there's 7,745, and that might be the total number of cards that you can get actually in this game, but there's about another 3,000 in the physical or Japanese version of the card game in the real world. And so we've been reset as far as Ranked Duel, so we should just play Ranked Duel today, and we don't want to fall down. So odds are almost 0 that I'm somehow going to fusion summon 3 monsters in today's stream to get the proficiency up, and honestly it's going to be probably a struggle. I wouldn't be surprised if it takes weeks if not months to actually accomplish that goal. For the accountability section, we're starting a little bit late today, and so I don't want to go too late into the accountability section. We should hopefully catch up on this week by starting late today, since I started kind of too early on Monday and Wednesday. I noticed on Prime Video, and it's too late now, that practically every Warner Brothers movie was leaving Amazon Prime Video. Like Shazam, Shazam 2, The Suicide Squad, which I watched that, and it definitely feels like The Suicide Squad as a movie is exactly what the Suicide Squad video game is going to be, just the exact same storyline, perhaps slightly done differently in the way the story is told and in the characters you play as, because the video game is going to have you grinding and fighting the same enemies over and over again, while the movie was a little bit less of that. I'd say that the Suicide Squad movie, which this is the one with Starro the Conqueror and weirdly Harley Quinn is in it, but she's kind of in her own complete separate story for half of the movie, and the rest of the group is in their own situation. What can I do here? This is a slow way to start a game. It's just put things face down. But yeah, the movie is done as an adult, mature, comedic movie that tries something different in that I feel like a lot of the shots are either them being artsy fartsy, or they are trying, the movie maker was trying to be artsy fartsy in the same way that a comic book can be artsy fartsy. Because honestly, yeah, when you are making a comic book, you can fairly easily have the type of weird shots that were in the Suicide Squad make more sense when it is just one panel that somebody has spent a lot of time on. But it does distinctively make the whole Suicide Squad movie feel very different from what you normally would expect from a comic book movie. It's not trying to be as realistic. It's not trying to be as serious. And I can see a possibility of that being the way comic book movies went. And certainly we've seen that happen before. Some of the Batman movies in the past have been very silly, and honestly, if it weren't for some of the early Batman movies that went very, very serious and realistic, or as realistic as they could be, then we really would have never been able to take that next step. Almost all comic books movies would have been silly. It would have been like the original Batman movie, which was from the 66-86 TV series, where Batman has shark repellent spray. Okay. Treat that as 2. Treat that as 3. Do that. I also watched Shazam 2 Fury of the Gods or whatever, and there's almost nothing to say about that movie though. And there's plenty of other Warner Bros. Movies that I straight up chose to not watch in the 12-hour time that I could have spent the entire time watching movies. Which, thankfully, I didn't. Not to say that I was particularly productive otherwise, but... yeah, the Joker movie was the one I did want to see, but it was also a serious movie, and just being prepared out of the blue to make to watch a serious movie was not likely something I really wanted to do. I feel like I watched something else too. Then I fell asleep watching, yeah, the grand tour, so I really don't have anything to say about that. And then I also wasted more time watching a couple episodes of Ghost Whisperer, which very noticeably there's an episode of Ghost Whisperer where the main female actress, who's pretty awful and really can't act in my opinion, for really no reason seems to have gone to this high school for a career day even though she doesn't have any children, so it just seems very weird even in a small town that somebody without children would be allowed in the school even in the 90s or on 90s TV to show off that she owns an antique shop. And then so the premise seemed contrived at the beginning, and then in the middle of the episode there's a teenage girl, at least that's what the character is described as a cheerleader, fully naked in the shower, and you're just seeing an entire naked back of this actress who's only going to be in that one episode, which is weird because there's just not been any of that. There's never been even implied like nudity or showering of the main older actress in Ghost Whisperer, so it feels like there was some real creepiness going on in that one episode, and that the entire episode was contrived to get around that. Outside of the shower scene, there you also have it centering around cheerleaders, so you have cheerleaders running around in cheerleading outfits, which, yeah, I feel like there is an argument even now to, in TV and media, depict cheerleading outfits as being somewhat more conservative, so having fabric and cloth cover the bellies of the high school kids, and skirts being longer than even they might actually be. Or in general, just don't have cheerleaders in TV shows. But yeah. Because it definitely feels like if you go to a props department and you look for cheerleading outfits for an actress, there's a decent chance that the props department is literally only going to have the shortest of skirt style cheerleading outfits that are available. And while that may be very much in line with how cheerleaders dress in like LA, California, high schools, it's very possibly not in line with the way people dress throughout the rest of the United States, or in at least some more conservative parts of the United States. Although I guess that is a bigger argument in general, as far as just there being a lot of TV that is made with LA mentality and LA style, and no real consideration for the rest of the potential target audience. I also watched Everything Everywhere All at Once as a movie, and I kinda liked it, but I don't think it anywhere deserved as much acclaim as it actually got. I feel like the problem with it is there's too much kung fu fighting in it early in the movie, which drags it on to be super long. Twice in this 2 hour and 20 minute movie, I paused the TV and just looked at how much time was potentially left. And yeah, it is very much a movie that feels like the fighting aspect and the comedic aspect of the fighting should have been boiled down to be about as half as long. So you could have probably gotten the first 40 minutes into 20 minutes of a tighter movie. It feels like they didn't really have enough of a budget for locations, and so you have some fairly boring locations that are repeated as the places that they are. There's a whole sequence where it's just rocks talking to each other that could have been cut out, or piñatas being cut out, or the people with hot dog fingers that potentially being cut out. Those are all silly ideas that a quick flash to it makes sense, but they went back to the universe and everything everywhere all at once too much, and then it tries to have this moral of the story at the end of the movie, and honestly it kind of tries to have 3 to 5 morals of the story at the same time, and it doesn't come off that way as having any kind of like strong moral to the story or wrap up of the general idea. The general idea being that somebody could jump through different alternate universes of themselves and gain the skills of the different people from the different universes, which is a decent thought, and honestly it's a much better idea for a TV series, because then you would potentially be able to do 3 to 5 seasons in the same way the TV series Chuck happened, where Chuck had all these different skills in his brains, and knowledge in his brains, but as a movie there needed a beginning, a middle, and the end, and I should have probably activated this first. It didn't really come off to me like there was so much a middle or an end. It's just a very long beginning and then kind of a rush to wrap things up. I guess in certain aspects too, it's just kind of missing a beginning. Like the husband character, the daughter character, the father character. I'm trying not to spoil it because it probably is a movie people would want to watch, and it is available still on Amazon Prime, but like all the characters, even the main protagonist, mother character, they just don't have enough of a setup for it to make sense, to start to like the character or even establish the character and understand the character, as before you start having the crazy hopping between different universes. And the crazy hopping between different universes, silliness just kind of goes on forever, and then the resolution goes on forever. It also is a movie that's not completely unbearable with the Chinese speaking being a Chinese movie, but there is a little too much of that happening when a Hunt for Red October style, we know they're speaking in Chinese, but we're going to just translate it to English really is the better solution for everything. That does remind me though, as far as other things I wasted my time on, that another thing I didn't like about the Suicide Squad was the fact that it jumped back and forth with the timeline at the beginning. Like, so it definitely makes more sense that it would be a story. It would have been better if the story was told just linear in a line. But yeah, it jumps around a little too much between like 5 minutes earlier, a few days earlier stuff, or it jumps between an A plot and a B plot. One of the jokes was very silly in that there was this character named Milton that I noticed he was kind of just following the Suicide Squad people, and I was just like, why is this guy following him? And they're not addressing it at all, because I thought potentially they had just mostly cut out the character, but then I guess the joke that they were setting up for was that Harley Quinn was gonna go, there's a guy named Milton with us? Who's Milton? I've never even heard of him. And that you as the viewer were supposed to take on that meta joke, which in fairness I guess I did, as far as just like, oh, they are gonna name this character that's just been following along with the group just so they can kill him off in a silly way. But honestly, that's probably a little too meta for a comic book movie, which at this point are kind of boiling down to there only being comic book movies. Anyways, and as far as the boring stuff, I did finish the alphabetizing of the hotkeys on my smart on-air sign, as far as having a selective pull down, which then just led to trouble with JavaScript to get it to kind of work. And I think I finally figured out how to get it to work, but it definitely doesn't feel like it wants to work easily. It definitely was fighting me for hours. Inherently, I can do an on change equals and then some one linear liners of JavaScript, so that when you pull down the selection menu of the hotkeys, it will change a hidden text input box, which it has to be a text input box to work with the rest of the Wi-Fi manager library software. Arguably, this would have been just way easier if they just allowed, if there was just an option to have selection pull down menus in the first place. But what it then creates a problem for, that didn't really take that long to figure out and research how to do that. But the next problem is if you re-enter the setup page, the pull down selection menu will just be back to whatever default setting, whatever the very first setting is. So if it says the hotkey is F1, it'll look like F1 even though the value will be the same. That wasn't hard to fix, but it doesn't look right. And so I'm just trying to have as much polish on this product as possible to not create confusion, not to create situations where people could, even if they were just not very technical, have confusion and say, hey, why is this hotkey reset every time I go back into the setup? Although in fairness, it is pretty much set up in such a way that you really should never go back to the setup once you've set it up. unless you've changed something big, changed the OBS WebSocket password or changed your Wi-Fi name or password. So yeah, in between watching all those TV and movies yesterday, I also finished the alphabetizing and moving the options around. I did recognize that there probably would have been a slightly shorter way to make the text take up less space, but I'm just going to leave it as it is since it's working. It'd probably be the difference of just a few lines of code at most, and not worth the effort to only do a find and replace, which is all it really would be doing, is just making it the source code more efficient and easy to read. It wouldn't actually be changing how the code itself ran. But yeah, a lot of debugging of the JavaScript, and still probably need to work on that a little bit. A lot of debugging, and still need to work on the erase button. That seems to not really work. I realized one of the functions, as far as checking if a file exists, seems to be incredibly slow, to the point where it is not the recommended or documented way to check to see if a file exists at all. Instead, it is just a case of you should try to open the file, and if you try to open the file, it will return an error if you if there's a problem. I also think I need to, just for testing purposes, change how it connects and sends signals, because that seems to be something that doesn't really work that often either after a while, as far as sending signals, although probably doesn't really matter either, because at the end of the day the device isn't supposed to be sending debug messages anyways. So yeah, I think there was specifically one place where I just typed in the wrong code. I heard another YouTuber just mention this, where the first 80% of a project takes 20% of the time, and then the next 20% of a project takes 80% of the time, and this definitely feels like that's the case. And it has me a little concerned, A, that again I'm still just not making video game footage, but B, it also makes me concerned that this whole project is not going to have enough polish to it to... I mean, I've probably already taken too long. Like, had this been something that just churned out in a week, which is what I kind of hoped would have happened, I would have had it finished, had some prototypes, had some people test the prototypes, and been ready to start selling it in some form or fashion on January 1st. But honestly, it might make a lot more sense to just wait 3 more months after January 1st until past like April 15th, tax day, whenever that is, into the second quarter at some point. Although I don't know if it really makes that big of a business difference if you start a business on the 1st of January versus past April. Fiscal years are different, certainly, but I don't know if it really changes that much. That being said, there is this possibility that at any point, if I just buckled down, I could finish the Smart On-Air Sign project completely and be done with it. And that's that. I'm still waiting on a few things from my Black Friday purchases to help me assemble them. I got a soldering iron and an electric screwdriver, and I'm waiting for like a thermal tape double-sided thermal tape that I'll use to actually attach the circuit board to the inside of the plastic casing. Yeah. And I've given some more thought onto that third generation potential idea of trying to figure out how could I flat pack this and ship it in a smaller case, or in general just make the package smaller. Like there is the pre-made on-air signs that I'm modifying are really deep for perhaps not as good of a reason as they should be. So if I was to 3D print the plastic element, I don't know if it really needs to be that deep to just diffuse the light. Although it may very well be the case that it needs to be that deep to diffuse the light. But certainly I could take the 6 phases of the rectangle box that it is and try and 3D print those as separate box faces. Although I don't know if they'd be as rigid or if they even need to be that sturdy. These signs theoretically are just supposed to be put on the wall and then forgotten about, but then they do have that chance of falling down the wall and breaking, and so if I made it with a 3D printed material, maybe it would be too breakable. Okay, I don't think there's anything else I can do here. Been trying to destroy this trap card. It's also worth, I guess, wrapping up the accountability section here by saying that yes, I'm still playing way too much on my phone. There is something very interesting on Memento Mori, which is the last game I think that will be interesting, and the game that will last almost certainly. Whereas I can feel I could lose interest in the 7 Mortal Sins Ecstasy game very quickly. I've pretty much lost interest already. Never really gained interest in it in the first place. And I could see getting saturated to the point where I've done everything new on Star Trek Lower Decks and Team Kafuma. But so I'm not even going to bother to really mention those, since nothing new has happened on any of those, really. But Memento Mori, with their new World 15, and starting a new save file effectively on World 15 while still being able to jump back to World 14, it creates this weird situation, and I've never seen this in another game, and it's kind of an interesting idea, in that most mobile games are not really accessible once you get 2 or 3 months out as far as to new players, because nobody wants to jump into a game. Even Yu-Gi-Oh is a great example here. Nobody would really want to jump into Yu-Gi-Oh right now, knowing that every other player is going to have fairly large advantages of having a bunch more cards and potentially just having a lot more accessories and decoration things, some of which were timed out, so you can't ever unlock that content. So if a game like Yu-Gi-Oh said, hey, we're gonna make a new world and it's gonna erase all your progress and you're just gonna start with a whole new starter deck, and you can do daily quests and things like that to unlock gems to get cards again. That's interesting, certainly. And the only time I've ever seen anybody else do that is when you have like super rich whales playing things like Hearthstone, who had collected all the Hearthstone cards and then just decided to make a secondary account and start all over again. But I've definitely never seen a video game say we're going to address that and let new players feel like they're getting an equal chance because everybody's starting at the beginning. And the entire worlds, maybe this was just added in an update for Memento Mori, I'm not sure, have the entire worlds give rewards based on how much progress everybody in the world has made. So even the whales getting to a very high level is not a bad thing. So yeah, I'm very much better served in the new world, World 15 in Memento Mori, and just starting over. I have quite a lot of extra gems, it feels like, even though I'm kind of wasting them. And I have at least a couple of characters I haven't been able to unlock that are timed characters in the new world. So it doesn't even really feel like if I was to fully abandon my first save file on World 14, I would really miss out on too much. So yeah, I would definitely say every mobile game developer should be thinking in those terms and saying, yes, we'll have one run through on a World 1, but then if we find we can better serve our audience, let's just reset the world and make a new save file for World 2. Now, it wouldn't be super crazy if somebody really loved Memento Mori for them to have 5 or 6 different save files amongst different worlds. Plus, you inherently put the whales in a weird situation where a whale might spend a ton of money in World 1, but are they really willing to then make a new save file in World 2 and then spend all that money a second time? And are they willing to do that 15 times over? Maybe they are, then Memento Mori makes a bunch of money. Maybe they aren't, and then the later worlds are not running into the generic problems that you run into by having whales, throwing the balance off of the whole system, or just pushing the developers to make more and more expensive products to service the whales, and I don't know, harvest the whales might be a better term. Now, I'd say that it is an idea that should be implemented not just on mobile games. There is a great example, I think, where World of Warcraft could have done better if it had done something like that, or just like Fallout 76 or Bungie or Destiny. Like, pretty much any mobile game of service game could take that same idea. World of Warcraft theoretically with its classic servers is doing something like that, but it took them decades and decades to reboot the narrative and the story to run the classic servers in the first place. Where if it wasn't more of a case that every 6 months or every month you could have started World of Warcraft from the beginning again, that would have been much more appealing. So he does that. That does that. Okay. So do I have an opportunity to activate this? There was a PC Gamer show that I assumed was actually just going to be a predecessor to the Video Game Awards. I just don't feel like the Video Game Awards really happened. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it does happen tomorrow, Saturday or Sunday instead. Alright, well, that's enough rambling, I think, in warm-up. So I think we'll just start to cover the video game news. So Video Games Chronicle says a premier watchmaker called Anicorn is releasing a set of $800 Mega Drive / Genesis watches. Like most of these limited edition or specialty designer watches, they tend to be unimpressive to me and way too expensive. I kind of assume that this faceplate flips up, but maybe it doesn't, which would really be pathetic, but yeah, kind of regardless, it is not for the likes of anybody with any sense or more sense than money. I don't know what would have to be the case to even begin to make me justify wanting to spend $800 on a watch. And it'd have to be basically a smartphone. It would have to be a very, very capable smartwatch, replacing the cell phone, which I could maybe see that argument. But then also, it would have to be capable of like seeing very large images some way, which is a major limitation at the moment for any kind of smartwatch, is that the screen size is just way too small, and the input, because the screen size is so small, is a problem. If it became a case that we just had a chip in our brains that projected a 100-inch screen and interacted with our thoughts, maybe at that point just having a watch-like device makes sense. I don't even know if carrying a device on your wrist as a just general concept is a better move than just having a device in your pocket, particularly if you're talking a smartphone sized device that didn't have to have a screen on it because you had a chip in your brain and you could just interact with it wirelessly, which that is very much sci-fi thinking. Let's see. I think I've run out of 4-star things. Could summon this. That would be a mistake. I should attack. Just do this. Then this. And then win. What is it? GameDeveloper.com? Yeah, that's the name of the website. GameDeveloper.com has an article here. Riot Games co-founder Mark Merrill has shifted his role to be the chief product officer. Here we have another great example of somebody not really being dressed up as nicely. It looks like he might even have a hole in his shirt there. Say the haircut's kind of a poorly done situation too. And it feels like either the lighting is showing a bald spot here or just an unbalanced buzz cut. Although I will say it does look like in the background that this potentially is an employee photo. It's just, it seems like they didn't really help him have a better photo, having a better colored shirt or button-up shirt, or even just like a polo shirt instead of a t-shirt, or noticing this hair. But yeah. So I suppose that is news of some sort, and I'm starting to yawn already. I better hurry up. Apparently the Video Game History Foundation is fundraising in the name of preservation. This nonprofit's winter fundraiser is underway, and donations this year are being doubled by sponsors including Studio MDHR and I Am 8-Bit. What's funny about Studio MDHR isn't that the makers of the sex games, Succubus, and then what was the one before that? I don't think it was called Scorn. I think it was the other one. That may be a different studio though, too. Or maybe the studio I'm thinking of is actually called Madhead. There is some weirdness here because you look at this and it, to me, seems like they are literally displaying, if not selling, collectibles in the name of preservation, which I guess maybe if you have 5 copies of something, maybe you can raise some things by selling a few products, but it also feels like you're not really preserving things if you're selling them. I haven't been paying a lot of attention to the Video Game History Foundation, but there definitely are some preservation societies, like museums, that really feel like they are more just the expansion of personal collections, and they are being treated very much like the expansion of personal collections. If the headline was changed to say, instead of the Video Game History Foundation was fundraising in the name of preservation, if it was instead the Louvre was fundraising in the name of preservation, and we saw like the Mona Lisa in the background being sold, that would not be acceptable by any means. Okay. Although, in all fairness, these might be repros. These don't look like these are real t-shirts, but these might be like little baby t-shirts. But yeah, these might be reprints, these might be reproductions being sold. The YouTuber who is making accusations against the Completionist and his charity came out with a new video pretty much saying, hey, they've tried to sweep this under the rug and not report on it at all, but guess what I found? The Completionists charity has also been having these golf tournament charity events for several years, and that money too does not seem like it is showing up in the finances at all. So it's not even a case now that it seems like the money is just sitting in an account and not actually being donated to charities, as much as the money is literally disappearing off books. But yeah, it definitely is a lesson about not trusting people on the internet, and don't trust in particular the nice guys on the internet, or people who sell themselves as nice guys on the internet or in the real world even. Like, but it is very much a case where you should always research a charity and donate directly to a charity, and not through these dumb fundraisers that gamers do. If anything, I would say it feels like sometimes gamers feel like they need to donate to charity maybe a little bit more than your average person, because they have internalized some of the nonsense shame that people try to throw onto gamers, that they are like lazy, unsocial layabouts, or that they're violent people or bad people in general. There's way too many propaganda pieces like that, and perhaps some of that has been internalized for some gamers, and then they are now bending over backwards when these charity events happen to prove people wrong. But yeah, donating to a charity is not going to make video game or haters like gamers anymore. Neither Sarkeesians of the world who are in particular profiting from stirring up anti-video game rhetoric weren't going to ever change their tune. I wouldn't be surprised if the Video Game Preservation or Video Game History Foundation is actually one of the closer to a personal collection style organizations that is more focused than you would think around having ROMs and pure copies of hardware. In particular, trying to make ROMs for LCD games that were just designed physically with hardware instead of being designed with programming. I did notice here on this picture though that this is one of those sewing machines that I think are connected by Game Boy back in the days when the Game Boy had enough processing power that it made more sense to make a sewing machine that ran off a Game Boy than it did to try to make your own sewing machine with processing power in it. One of the things that I was thinking about is the chip that I'm using for my smart on-air sign is a 160 megahertz, like I think single core processor. It is, of course, many generations ahead of what would be a 386, 486, 486 DX which 486DX double speed would be, I guess, the closest equivalent, and that would have been something in the early 90s, late 80s, as far as a processing unit for a computer that did 180 megahertz. It is also noticeably that the last time you could have something that was fairly passively cooled before you started to get into a Pentium 1 and Pentium 2 that really should have at least a heat spreader on it, if not a full-on fan. Pentium 2s, I think, pretty much had to have fans. So we really may have made, while we've made a ton of progress as far as making processing chips smaller and faster, we may not have made any progress whatsoever as far as making them that much more efficient, to the point where cooling is not an issue. But it is important to point out, though, that a 160 megahertz reduced instruction set chip that's brand new in 2023 is still going to be way more efficient than what you were doing with a 486DX. In fact, with every new year, I'm increasingly surprised that computers ever caught on in the first place, because they were so incredibly slow and inefficient and just not that helpful. And I imagine it is just a matter of the world not knowing any better. But yeah, I guess they all only had to really compete against calculators and word processors. So yeah, the Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League video game had some gameplay videos leaked. Over 30 minutes of footage has been published from the game's alpha test. Having now watched the Suicide Squad movie, it definitely feels like this is a case where they were making this game to be based off of that movie, and then at some point the movie called Suicide Squad without the "the" came out, so they swapped out Captain Boomerang and Deadshot instead of Bloodsport and like Polka Dot Man or Ratcatcher. And they may, for the most part, Shark Guy still seems to be there, unless this is a different Shark Guy. And Harley Quinn's still there, but Harley Quinn was in both Suicide Squad movies. There's something that's fairly obvious, and it's stupid that it even needs to be said out loud, but it probably does need to be told to Warner Brothers now in particular, since they're owned by AT&T, and they should rethink how they do things. But particularly their movies, if they would just make half as many movies and put twice the budget in it, they'd be a lot more successful. It's crazy that you have like the Batman, the Batman, or the Justice League, and then a new Batman, and then a new Aquaman. It's like, and those aren't, none of those movies as concepts weren't terrible ideas to make. The problem is they just didn't put enough into them or commit to them long enough to establish a consistent cinematic universe. They've just tried to reboot and redo things when they should have just said, no, this is the Flash movie we're going to make for the next 10 years. This is the Suicide Squad movie we're going to make for the next 10 years. We're not going to just try to redo it over and over again. Which that is very different from the idea of comics, where you could have 2 or 3 different Batman comics happening at the same time, with Batman in completely different locations, written by completely different people. That is somewhat acceptable in the case of comics, but in the case of movies, it's completely unacceptable. See if this works for me, otherwise I think I'm gonna lose. Without even watching the video, which noticeably Video Games Chronicle's not linking to, though I can pretty well guess that this game is going to be very boring. I just don't see a way that you're not going to have it be super boring as a series, as a game. I would say Suicide Squad is also a dumb group of people to focus on as far as the DC universe goes. But whatever, they can't succeed one way or the other with any of them. Oh, I screwed up terribly there, didn't I? GameDeveloper.com says Steam is dropping support for the macOS Mojave and by extension 32-bit games. The Steam store will stop considering games that offer only 32-bit Mac binaries to be Mac compatible at the end of 2023. They've already done this, I assume, for Windows, which generally I don't think I don't think Windows games have been inherently 32-bit games that have been allowed for a while on Windows OS. Although it is also a very different situation with Mojave Mac OS because there is that big split that is either happening right now or will happen where Mac OS becomes just iOS and 32-bit games in general and 32-bit applications in general are just not going to be accepted and allowed. Of course, nobody buys a Mac and tries to play games on it if they're a serious gamer. There's just been no support there at all. Wish I could skim a little bit better here though to figure out if Windows 32-bit games are still compatible. With 32-bit games. At some level, they're probably is very much a case where 32-bit games on Windows still run fine, and it would be kind of crazy if old 32-bit video games were not allowed from Windows and DOS, because then you would see a fairly significant amount of games just not allowed on Steam at that point. But yeah, if anything, I would say it's very much a case where Mac drew the line in the sand, Apple drew the line in the sand with Mojave and then their next version of their operating system. This probably isn't going to hurt too many people though. The Blumhouse Games hired veterans from Private Division and Sledgehammer. The fledgling game company is hoping to help indies make original horror titles. And then, well, I should be over here on this side, shouldn't I? Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis for PC launches on December 7th. It's currently on Apple and Google Play, so it's a mobile game first. Which, yeah. Some of these screenshots don't really portray that very well. I'm not sure if this smoothly interconnects with the Final Fantasy VII Reboots games or not, or if it's just a disconnected side game. EA, according to GameDeveloper.com, has open sourced Mirror's Edge and EA Sports Football Club's accessibility tech. The publisher has expanded its patent pledge initiative by open sourcing tools and tech that from some of its biggest franchises. It's important to note here, this is not open sourcing the actual games, though. This is just them open sourcing whatever small amount of anti-nausea technology was developed back when Mirror's Edge, the original Mirror's Edge in particular, was made. Not even, I imagine, Catalyst, and whatever accessibility tech is in EA Sports Football Club 2024, which is a much more modern game, but I bet doesn't really have that much accessibility. And the EA Sports World Rally Championship, which again, I don't suspect any of these have much accessibility stuff into this. This may very well be a case where EA doesn't care about accessibility, so why not open source it, or EA wants to be seen like they care about accessibility, so they're open sourcing it in the hopes that more people would help them develop the accessibility tech programs, so they don't have to program it themselves. In particular, Mirror's Edge is not a very good accessible game. If you have color blindness, you're going to struggle with the game. I don't think there really is a colorblind mode in it, although maybe you won't struggle as much as I think you would. If you have epilepsy or nausea problems, balance problems, you probably wouldn't be able to enjoy the game. If you have finger problems as far as holding controllers and pressing buttons, there was just nothing about it that felt like Mirror's Edge was being very helpful about that at all. There was definitely times in Mirror's Edge where it felt like even as a average player, I was struggling to press the right buttons and accomplish what I really wanted to accomplish. It's a shame that there isn't just, particularly in the first Mirror's Edge, a let the game play itself mode that you could unlock after beating the game the first time, where you could just watch it like a movie, because that might be very interesting to look at. Apparently Microsoft is actively working on a mobile game marketplace, both for Apple and Google Android phones, which, yeah, it definitely makes sense. It makes all the sense in the world that you would want to have some competition there. My biggest concern with that, though, is that what's going to happen is we would have just duopolies, which is probably what will happen, in that the EU will tell Google and Apple that they have to open up and have their own a secondary marketplace. Android phones already have secondary marketplaces. Apple phones don't. But then really it's just going to come down to Google and Microsoft on Android phones and Apple and Microsoft on iPhones. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to run to the bathroom, so I'm going to pause the recording and I'll be back in a few minutes. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. So, yeah. We were talking about Microsoft actively working on the Xbox Mobile Marketplace. This coincidentally, or maybe not so coincidentally, also lines up with a slick deal, basically sale of multiple retailers selling the Xbox Series X for $350. One bundle I saw with Diablo 4 included in that, which makes it even a slightly better deal. Although, yeah, Diablo 4 probably should just be a free game anyways. So it kind of would make a lot of sense where there was perhaps not a full abandonment but a severe de-emphasis on the next generation of consoles, which it's going to be a struggle. I mean, I suspect we'll have a longer console generation than they would like this time around too, in favor of them not trying to sell a $600 to $1,000 console. They may just try to use the ever-increasing number of game developers that they've acquired to make games they can play on potentially mobile too, on top of that. Of course, I don't want to see Microsoft spend really any effort at all to make a mobile game, per se. Something that feels like a mobile game. I don't want a Genshin Impact by Microsoft, which would be about the best example of a mobile game. Maybe they could have one or two teams that have a really good idea, but yeah, I don't want to see a lot of effort put into that. And I do question if this might not be a case where Bethesda and ZeniMax had already had plans to make mobile games, and this is somehow infecting the mentality of Microsoft in total, in that they are now perhaps throwing good money after bad because they are trying to create a mobile marketplace just so Bethesda and ZeniMax can release their mobile games, and then they will be pot committed because they created this mobile marketplace that maybe they shouldn't have bothered to make, and they will then have even other fields make mobile games, where it would have made a lot more sense for Microsoft to simply say, no, cancel all the mobile games, we're not doing mobile. And I could see them making the argument that we're Windows and Windows only, as far as our development goes. But yeah, of the companies that Microsoft owns, while there are a few games that maybe could be playable on mobile, none of them I think are benefited by being played on mobile, nor do I think any of those companies are the right kind of companies to make mobile games or try something new. WWE 2K24 has been rated ahead of an announcement, according to Video Games Chronicle, which, okay, I mean, that's not really surprising, is it? Apparently, GameDeveloper.com has this article, which seems to be new, saying that Fable 3's development was 18 months of regretful compromise. I wonder if this is an interview with the main developer, the creative director, or it says ex-staffers. In a weird way, though, having actually played Fable 3, I don't think Fable 3 is really a bad game by any means, and I feel like this is a kind of article that would imply that it was way worse than it was. That there's all the Fable games have some weird story element in the middle of them, but as a fantasy RPG game, I feel like it was fine. I think it was definitely in line with other games of the time, if not at the head of its class at the time. And I just don't see a real reason to potentially have a retrospective that would imply it was worse than it was. This is the developers being sour, effectively, that they had to compromise. Well, you always have to compromise. And if anything, the fact that it only took 18 months of compromises, maybe not 18 months in total, to develop Fable 3, just highlights how much success was there, because I would have really expected it to be closer to 48 months of development around to make Fable 3. You also have the problem of the main guy, the spokesman for Fable, just throwing out ideas and then demanding those ideas being added to the game, which is probably what led to a lot of the compromises, and making the game chaotic. The newest Fable game still really only has that one trailer, and yeah, Peter Molyneux is the guy I'm trying to remember the name of, as far as the guy in charge of Fable, is no longer in charge of Fable, so the remaining people, if there are any remaining people working on the new Fable, are not hamstrung by Peter Molyneux making promises and them having to struggle to put those promises in the actual game. There definitely is room, whether it's called Fable or not, for a fantasy-based RPG game, particularly since Elder Scrolls and Skyrim 2, whatever it's actually going to be called, is not looking like it's anywhere close to coming out. So there's plenty of room for a Fable game to come out, and Fable will always try to be a little bit more comedic anyway, so a comedy fantasy RPG game works in a funny way. Fable really should be the competitor to Final Fantasy, and there should be as many Fable games as there are Final Fantasy games, but there just aren't. So yeah, I don't know if there's really a lot you can take from an article like this other than developers being sore they had to compromise without reading the full article, of which I imagine even then there's not a lot to really take from it. GameDeveloper.com also, and I guess they probably were struggling for articles, put out this A Guide to Choosing Age-Appropriate Games, a tool for informed decisions by parents, although noticeably they put this out November 30th, after Black Friday, Cyber Monday, when you might very likely be buying video games for your kids. So too little too late on that. And I imagine they're not doing too much to be that helpful. Like, it's probably important to point out that I don't think been an adults only rated ESRB game released that actually got adults only rating in years, if not decades. I wouldn't be surprised if you're talking about 20 games in total have been given adults only 18 plus rating. The vast majority of games are mature, 17 plus, which I'd say is probably at least 85% of all games ever released. There's almost no E for Everyone games that are released at all, or that aren't actually E 10 plus for everyone, which they're not really explaining the difference in how that's labeled and how that's branded. But yeah, as far as T for teen, there's probably a decent 10% of games. If I say 85% are mature, another 10% are teen, and then I would say probably 3 to 4% are E10 plus, with 1% E from Everyone, and I would say it would literally be a rounding error as far as down to 0% adults only. And it's not a great system, frankly, because it just doesn't tell you what's actually in it when you're just looking for a letter grade anyways. and parents that are going to be concerned probably need to be concerned for certain ways, different reasons, because there are certainly what I think are fairly appropriately rated for teen visual novels that have anime girls in the bathtub showing at least side boobs that parents would have more of a problem with than for mature military first-person shooter game where you're just shooting a bunch of people, but it's not particularly gory or even relatively speaking that violent because you're just shooting people. You're not also stabbing them or cutting off their heads or blowing them up. It's not scary, which some parents definitely would want to steer away from spooky and scary things too, particularly for younger kids. So none of this is helpful without better descriptions, and the ESRB has not been helpful here, really. They have sexual content, meaning non-explicit depictions of sexual behavior, possibly including partial nudity, which means almost nothing. Like, at least hardcore and softcore means something. Hardcore means you're going to see the lower genitals of a male or female. Softcore means you won't. Whereas non-explicit means nothing, because it still includes partial nudity. So you may see a boob, you may see a butt, but you won't see a boob and a butt and full frontal. And generally, I would say they probably mean that you might see partial nudity in one section of the game and then depictions of sexual behavior, and that there's kissing, hugging. Although arguably, if somebody made a list of games that had characters hug, it's probably a very small list. Or people heading off to a bedroom, but then the camera panning away. All of that may fall under that. Whereas strong sexual content then says it is explicit and or frequent, which again is not a great definition, possibly including nudity, but possibly not. Well, shouldn't it at least demand that there is nudity here in that case? Alcohol references, but no drug references is a category. References to or images of alcoholic beverages, that being different than use of alcohol. And clearly you can see how the ESRB definitely has a Christian-based puritanical view on a lot of this stuff, because those are like partial nudity, alcohol references, use of alcohol, all fairly acceptable in Japanese society, for instance, and completely unacceptable in fairness to like the UAE, which is oddly funding a lot of development of games these days. Like under, I think it's the words haram, under Islam, we'll just say that in particular under Islamic law, the consumption of alcohol, I believe, is completely forbidden, and any depiction of anything they would consider nudity is completely forbidden. Then some of this, as far as the age rating stuff, has been carved out as ways to get lower ratings. Obviously, when you have fantasy violence, violent actions in a fantasy nature involving human or non-human characters and situations easily distinguishable from real life. I would argue almost all video games should be easily distinguishable from real life, unless you're making a full motion video that is not immediately apparent that it's interactive. Like, yes, there are crazy people out there that can't tell the difference between fiction and reality, but using that as an excuse to say, well, this game deserves a lower rating because it's fantasy violence instead of regular violence is silly. And in violence are scenes including or involving aggressive conflict may contain bloodless dismemberment, but apparently cannot contain a bloody dismemberment, which is an odd maximum considering there's no other limitation here. And they're really not explaining this situation particularly well, because I think fantasy violence is just not even something you can use if your game is rated mature. And then bloodless dismemberment may be used in mature, but if you have a bloody dismemberment, you're probably going straight to adults only. Alcohol use, alcohol references tend to be for younger games. But yeah, smoking, vaping, if somebody is saying the F word, the S word, the F-U-C-K word, not the other F word, which arguably, you know, nothing here really from more of a progressive leaning bent here. Noticeably here, there's been no change or update to say hate speech, hateful words, dead naming, homophobia, misogyny, or biases based on gender or race or racism. Like, nothing like that. There's a long list of bad things that could be flags. Depictions of slavery, depictions of Nazism, depictions of the South during the Civil War. All of those are just as valid things to potentially mention if you were a certain parent and you were certain types of parents. You didn't want to show or glorify certain types of behavior. But yeah, this list has been like this for a very long time, and they haven't bothered to update it at all. And then the rest of this is really just kind of nothing, as I'm trying to skim it, I suspect. But yeah, it really needs a detailed system, a much better detailed system, or at least some better code system. The right move would be to put a QR code on the front of every game from the ESRB, and the QR code would open up a permanent ESRB landing page for that game that would then describe all of the content in it. Yes, having a ETM and adults only rating on the packaging also makes some sense, but going into actual detail doesn't really make some sense. And I do want, in general, just justifications as far as a full explanation of why any of these things would be flagged, because I could totally see as a parent that there would be parents that might be okay with non-explicit depictions of sexual behavior if you're talking about a dating simulation game where it's a preteen just dating a bunch of cute anime boys, and then learning social skills and learning dating skills from it, and actually becoming more capable and confident in his outside world behavior, versus a situation where it's a brothel simulator, and while it's not explicit, you're sending women to act as prostitutes, and then you're collecting money, and it's some kind of strategy game where you're just trying to collect as much money as possible on a brothel, running a brothel. Even if it was a legal brothel, those two scenarios could be very different in a lot of people's minds for a lot of different ways. And in the same way, here's an even better example. a game might be a play doctor simulator where you're actually pretending to be a doctor and you see partial nudity because of that. Like you're doing heart surgery and the lady's topless because you're doing heart surgery in a game, where I'd be okay with that. But then I could also see a situation where the game has partial nudity for kind of no reason, and it just comes off as weird, where you're, say, playing a solitaire game and then there's just one character that happens to be topless out of the blue. That might be a little bit too much depending on the age of the kids to allow. The truth of the matter, though, and I'll move forward from this story since there's really nothing that helpful here, is very rarely do we have a situation where in a GameStop, you can see it says pre-owned games here, and there's a parent even with them, or there's a parent that even cares. For the most part, the kid behind the counter, which, yeah, young adult behind the counter, doesn't care at all and isn't really held to any real rules or regulation, and will sell an immature game to a kid even this young, who looks to be about, I'd say 9 or 10. Yeah, he'll sell an immature game to them fine, and most of the time parents won't even care, and parents don't like to be questioned on it. And certainly GameStop hasn't done anything to try and curve that. It's not like the immature games are in a different section, or that they're higher up and that the kids' games are lower down, or anything like that. At the very least, most online storefronts are a little bit better about describing games, but they're actually not very good for purchasing certain games. Arguably, it would be nice if there was a front page link on Steam to say games that are rated E for everyone, but I don't think there is a way on Steam to particularly even sort based on ESRB ratings, and Steam really should make their own rating system and do a better job than ESRB. But yeah, the best case scenario is on Steam you go to like a Lego game and then you get recommended other Lego games, but the algorithm is so bad on Steam that wouldn't really even be guaranteed. I don't think any of the other storefronts are any better. So yeah, there definitely is room for competition against Steam to sell games, or at least to describe and sort games. Moving on, the Krafton and NetEase companies have settled over PUBG and Knives Out copyright quarrel. This is another GameDeveloper.com. This has been 5 years in the making. Whether I think it was NetEase ripped off PUBG with Knives Out, which I don't think anybody in general is playing Knives Out anymore, or I'm not sure if anybody ever was. And I guess it's probably going to be one of those settlements in which neither side admits fault. But as a settlement, it's not going to create any precedent to say that PUBG in particular invented the Battle Royale concept. Obviously, it can't really claim that, since the movie Battle Royale already existed before PUBG came out, and in general, the concept of a Battle Royale in general has existed for probably hundreds, if not thousands of years. So, another lawsuit that I'm sure just made a bunch of lawyers rich and wasted people's time. Here's a Video Games Chronicle article pointing out that the Xbox Series X has been priced to a record low of $349. you can get it with or without Diablo 4, which I don't know why you wouldn't just get Diablo 4. Yeah, you can get it at Walmart for $3.49, which there's speculation of an Xbox Series X refresh. I don't believe that this is real mock-up, but this is some of the leaked documents from the Activision Blizzard merger court case from Microsoft directly. The problem with this idea, and it's the same problem with the PS5 Slim, is that there is just a very large fan and cooling inside the Xbox Series X. So yes, you could round the edges and put a giant fan at the top, but then you lose the disk drive, and that was what they were promoting here, was the idea of completely losing the disk drive for the Series X version, which definitely makes an argument to buy the current version while it's on sale, although arguably with the Steam Deck and PC gaming, $350, it was a somewhat decent deal, but not a quite good enough deal to 100% say you absolutely should buy an Xbox Series X at this point, even if you had a bunch of 360 games and or Series Xbox One games on disc. I think it still might be cheaper and wiser to jump over to PC and just rebuy everything that you really want to replay on Steam, which inherently maybe highlights the issue with console gaming at the moment, is that there's not really any consoles that I can 100% recommend as far as purchasing. I don't think it makes sense to buy a Switch at the moment unless you can get a really good deal, which I haven't seen. And I don't think it's a good deal to buy a PS5 or an Xbox Series X at all. The only thing that slightly makes sense is just to pay full price and buy the Steam Deck OLED model. Which, yeah, that one's probably a good one you can suggest, other than the fact that it's expensive. Let's see, as far as 24-hour peaks, it again feels like we're starting to see more games over 100,000 again. We're up to 15 games now over the 100,000 mark. Unfortunately, my chart still not being super helpful. We can see PUBG seems to be falling down again, whereas Apex Legends seems to be going up, and then Lethal Company seems to be going down a little bit, GTA seems to be going up, and Baldur's Gate seems to be going up a little bit, but it all seems like it's still kind of overall trending in a downward pattern, and I suspect it will be that way for the rest of the year. We don't have anything happening on Steam. Somebody put a picture asking why Dragon's Dogma Origin, I think was the name of the game, hasn't been remade. And it showed off all the characters from that game, and literally there's only one character I remember. Morgana, I believe is her name. Which, yeah, there's a problem when you have a RPG game with a whole team of people, and there's like 6 people and only one is memorable, and it's just Morgana, and she's only memorable because she's cosplayed, because she wears a sash as a shirt and shows a lot of skin. But yeah, you can browse by category on Steam, which can be somewhat helpful, but and games based on what you play might be helpful, but may not be. Let's see. But yeah, overall, don't think there's any way at all Shower with Your Dad's Simulator apparently just got a multiplayer update. That was one of the joke games I covered, and back when I was trying to be more memey on my YouTube channel. But yeah, there's no way at all to sort by age. And we still have the blue background again. Although scrolling down here, it goes black for a little bit and then it's back to blue. Yep. That is the big question, I guess, as to at what point do they fully abandon the blue background themes on Steam. They'll probably make a big deal about it. Or maybe they won't. Maybe we'll just start to see more and more games with black backgrounds. Because it does seem like they have somewhat changed the way it browses. In that you are seeing more black backgrounds every now and then as you scroll down further and further. Let's see, the real test here would be to turn off uBlock Origin and then reload the page and then get back to the top. Here. Store, community, chat support, your store. You have the discovery queue. Then you have a bunch of tags based on what games you played. The new noteworthy. You could go to adult only under a theme, I guess, now and search for adult only, but that's not going to help you at all as far as kids games. There's just no category here at all on the shop that would say give me E for everything, everyone, unless it was a lab, which DLC for your games. We could try that. They've, for the most part, abandoned this idea of experimenting with labs too. Like there hasn't been a new announcement in a long time from that. Yep. If anything, it would make a lot of sense to just have a Steam.kids or Steam.kids .com type website, its own separate website, and that might work fairly well as a concept. Anyways, let's go through the Video Games Chronicle articles before I fall asleep. We already talked about this one. Cyberpunk 2077 is getting a metro system in its next update, which probably is just a fast travel, I would guess. If not, I imagine it's not going to add that much content. I doubt you're going to get on the trains and then get robbed and start whole adventures that happen on the trains. Let's see, Capcom has confirmed it plans to make more Resident Evil remakes. The company has released Resident Evil 2, 3, and 4 in recent years. Noticeably, they did release a Resident Evil 1 remake that wasn't quite the same level of quality as the other remakes. The question, though, comes down to what can they do with 5 and 6? Like, there's major problems that Capcom still is sore about as far as 5, and 6 was very poorly received. So, at best, if they're not going to drastically change the direction of the story and the events that have already occurred, they're probably better off making a cheap remake of 5 and 6 and then just moving on to seeing if they can get away with making a remake of 7, or they go back and they remake 1, or they decide to make some of these spin-off games, which, you know, Code Veronica might make a lot more sense than anything I've suggested so far, is remaking the spin-off games. It does seem like, though, good riddance, they've pretty much given up on trying to make any more, or announce at least any more, multiplayer Resident Evil games. Capcom, though, should probably try and release something else they have the rights to. Pretty sure Capcom has like Mega Man or something like that, where it would be an interesting thought, at least, to try and remake that in the same style as a Resident Evil remake and re-release it. Or they very possibly have a few games that didn't sell that well, that didn't ever get any sequels. That might be an interesting experiment to remake. Apparently the first GTA 6 trailer will be released on December 5th. Elden Ring producer says its expansion will be a little while yet and compares it to Bloodborne. The Suicide Squad gameplay video leaked. We talked about the price of the Xbox. Modern Warfare 3 Season 1 launch trailer and roadmap have been released. A game called Penny Blood Hellbound is coming to early access on Friday. It's a prequel to a recently crowdfunded RPG. I assume the crowdfunded RPG might be a tabletop real-world game, and so that this is perhaps a prequel to that, or it might very well just be a case that the other game is also coming out on digital platforms. Xbox is in discussions about partners about launching a mobile store. Noticeably here, Video Games Chronicle used Candy Crush as an example before, which is probably, now that they own King, they own Candy Crush, and that would be a mobile game that would make sense to be on a Microsoft mobile store. Although Candy Crush needs to be remade to be a lot more fair and a lot less greedy. I talked about this. Apparently some people think the Batman Arkham Knight on Switch is better than they were expecting. They are doing visual comparisons. I assume this is a Switch on this side, which in all fairness doesn't look that terrible. I would say one of the things about the later Batman games that I've played do feel like they have this weird wetness to them and darkness to them, and while that works fine, you can just have a drier, shinier Batman. That's fine, and you can definitely have a brighter looking Jim Gordon. So yeah, there's almost a fog effect that feels like it's happening here, and with it turned off, the graphics look acceptable, certainly, if not sometimes better. I also heard, though, that there's some major frame pacing, stuttering type issues, and so yeah, the port has frame stutters, but comments appear to be mostly positive, according to Video Games Chronicles. Everywhere's first gameplay demo shows a large action stage created by a single player. Want to check out that video at VGC. Call of Duty arrives on Nvidia GeForce Now, fulfilling Xbox's promise. I don't think anybody really thought that they were going to back out on any promises Microsoft has made. However, the ink is still not quite dry on the Activision Blizzard deal, I'm sure. Countries could undo the merger if they really wanted to. Let's see, Baldur's Gate 3's latest update is 30 gigs and adds a new playable epilogue. Patch 5 also adds a honor mode and a custom mode, which I would be interested in knowing what the honor mode it means. Let's see. Yeah, it just says honor mode. And I would assume that means that since it is based off of like Dungeons and Dragons style gameplay, honor mode forces you to be honorable and not change your positions or backstab characters that your style of character you've selected wouldn't backstab. So if you're playing as an elf, perhaps in honor mode you can't backstab elves. Or if you're playing on the side of good, you have to always pick the good choice. But yeah, I really would like to know a better explanation. The PS5 Slim Black Friday deal cut the pre-order price down to £459, which is, yeah, not as good as $350. Let's see, and some of these articles I think we've already covered. Yeah. So this may be still a problem with this part of my macro now that I'm noticing, in that Video Games Chronicles articles are being opened up in large numbers, going back very, very far on stories we've already talked about. Yep. With some of these stories not mattering at all. Now, alright, that moves us to the Gamatsu articles. Talked about the GTA trailer. A PlayStation Partner Awards for 2023 Japan Asia winners have been announced. I never did figure out why Memento Mori thought it won a Google Play Award. The only thing I could assume is they either got confused and maybe were nominated, or they won an award in a different language that dash region. I wouldn't be surprised if Memento Mori did win an award in Japan, for instance, but didn't win an award in the Americas or in the West. Although you would think that awards, even if they are targeted to a specific region as far as nominees, should be globally announced. Final Fantasy XVI, Genshin Impact, and RE4 getting the Crown Awards from PlayStation, with partner awards going to lesser games, and then special awards going to probably lesser games. And then the User's Choice Awards giving out just about the same. I feel like there's a decent chance that this PlayStation Partner Awards had very few nominees. And yes, I would say I've never heard of this award ceremony and wouldn't put much weight on it since it is being run by PlayStation, because they would obviously exclude anything that was not on the PlayStation, which doesn't make quite enough sense. We talked about this game, Penny Blood. Hellbound, I guess. The EVO for Japan 2024 title lineup has been announced. It looks like several fighting games, Grand Blue Fantasy, Guilty Gear Strive, King of Fighters 15, Street Fighter 3, Third Strike, Fight for the Future, Street Fighter 6, Tekken 8, and 109. In Birth 2, Sis Celeste, Grand Blue Fantasy vs. Rising. Noticeably, no Smash Brothers listed here. And yeah, I feel like fighter game people in general still love to have Smash Brothers in these tournaments, or near these tournaments. Still love to play Smash Brothers. no replacement for Smash Brothers either, however, and there have been several over the past year that might have made sense to include. And then there probably is a fairly long list of games here that could have been included but weren't. It feels like there was at least enough room on this logo for 2 more games to be included. The Bar Owner Simulator RPG Adventure Bar Story is coming to the PS4 and 5 and Switch. The Switch version is due out December 21st in Japan. Western release is also planned. This is kind of a great example of a game that would get that kind of label of frequent alcohol user reference and cause it to have a higher rating than it probably deserves. Let's see. It really, to me, looks like it is very much just a RPG Maker looking simulation game. Definitely is not that crazy to potentially want to grow up and own a bar. You shouldn't do it if you want to own a bar just to drink alcohol, but you know, bars are generally just restaurants that serve alcohol and can make a lot more money because they sell alcohol than a restaurant that does not serve alcohol at all. But yeah, that is also probably a fantasy of previous generations, and I wouldn't be surprised if kids these days wouldn't really want to own a bar. It's also a nightmare scenario if you watch Bar Rescue, as far as just how even a well-meaning boss can really ruin a bar, and it takes a lot of work, a lot of effort. It's not just easy money. I guess it's not coming to PC though. The mystery visual novel Suspects Room Kishicho Monzen Sho Torishirabe Han has been announced for PS4 and 5, Switch, PC, iOS, and Android. Seemingly a wide variety of locations. Don't have a Steam link yet. Stalker 2 Heart of Chernobyl Strider trailer and screenshots are available. Is Stalker 2 Heart of Chernobyl DLC, or is it just the Stalker 2 game? Yeah, not sure. But yeah, it's already on my fall list. I guess the difference here is that if you were going to play a Stalker game, you're going to be on the surface a little bit more often than if you were playing a Metro game, where I don't think you ever make it to the surface in Metro games. Let's see, Vampire the Masquerade's Bloodlines 2 has added a Banu Hakim as a third playable clan. I didn't even know this was out. Of course, there's too many Vampire the Masquerade games in development or recently released. Penny's Big Breakaway has an animated trailer if you want to watch that on Gamatsu. Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth English dub story trailer is also available. And then Crown Wars The Black Prince release date has been moved up to March 7th of 2024, which this is an odd example of a game being pushed up on the release schedule, not being moved back and delayed. A game called Solium Infernum launches February 14th for PC. Got this angel looking dude. Yeah. Somewhat interesting looking visuals, but overall it looks like it's just a card game. So it can't really interest me that much. Let's see, the game Pacific Drive launches February 22nd, 2024. Do we have that on the following list already? I do think I finally got the plugin to work correctly. Songs of Silence launches spring 2024 and then later for PS5 and Xbox Series. Game called Ultros launches February 13th. A lot of these announcement dates 3 months away, basically. Homeworld 3 being delayed to March 8th. A great example of that. Islands of Insights launches February of 2024. Seemingly no actual release date though. Flintlock: The Siege of Dawn launches in the summer of 2024. The roguelike dungeon crawler Cryptic Path has been announced for PC. My head is just spinning here. I don't know a way of really speeding up this process either. A game called Spine has a gameplay trailer, story-focused action game for PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. Obviously, there is a spine element to this, although I'm not sure that means every character has a mechanical Dead Space style spine, or if it's just this one lady. Let's see if we can get some better screenshots. It's an interesting character design because you want her to have this thing on her spine and that they're not showing a ton of legs, instead going with red stockings and then tight, I would call them booty shorts, but I'm not sure if that's the real description, tight jeans. And then that works together to actually have her stand out visually quite a bit and have her own design. She's got a kind of tube top type bra here and red highlights. Thing I want to see though is if any of the other characters have anything on their spines, and I'm not really seeing a lot of evidence that they do. So it feels like it's just exclusive to her. Of course, you can't really tell too much from stationary screenshots. A horror fishing adventure game called Drowned Lake has been announced for PC. Yet another. Arguably, we're getting too many of these games at this point, and it's going to oversaturate the niche market that would have been interested in that. A game called Demon School has been delayed to Q2 of 2022. I don't know if we've seen this one before. Doesn't seem like it. Frostpunk 2 has a teaser trailer if you want to check that out. Which, yeah. Not sure if I ever actually play Frostpunk 2 since I didn't play Frostpunk 1. A deck building strategy game called Ironhive has been announced for PC. Which I guess at a certain point, deck building games don't replace collectible card games. They just don't get enough support and updates to justify playing that instead of Yu-Gi-Oh, which would be my thought. If I could find something better than Yu-Gi-Oh, I might consider switching over to it, but Also, I don't really have a lot of interest in playing any collectible card game at this point. Would like to find something that works like a collectible card game, but with daily quests, but is less time consuming, less energy demanding. The game Tuchia is coming to Steam in March of 2024. Currently, it's an Epic Games Store exclusive. The city builder and real-time strategy game Republic of Pirates has been announced for PC. So we finally, back on Friday, have hit a point where we're getting announcements and press releases and news. Hybrid strategy game and first-person shooter game Wild Bastards has been announced for PC. Let's see. Harold Halibut launches in early 2024 for the PS5 and 4 and the Xbox One and Series and PC. Which just looks like this potentially is a point-and-click adventure game, although it's tagged as a walking simulator, which I don't feel like it really is. Let's see. Unreal 2 Back on Track has been announced for PC. Let's keep on moving. Really am rather tired at the moment. See if I can maybe adjust my chair a little bit. I basically think I need to be leaning forward and nearly ejected from my chair, which, yeah, this recliner can do that. It is one of those old people chairs that will straight up help you stand up if needed be. Not that I use it like that very often. But it's nice to have the option, certainly, to go up on top of going down. It also lies almost completely flat. The open world survival crafting game Under a Rock for PS5, Xbox Series, and PC has been announced. Another game must have just been announced. See, and this is the kind of art style that feels like could be something like Fable, and it definitely makes a lot of sense that you would have more of these type of games. If anything, I think Fable is maybe too mature for its own good, or at least previous Fable games are, when they really didn't need to be, because you are going to have this weird split now between, oh, you can get STDs and use condoms in Fable 3, or a new Fable, and then Baldur's Gate 3, which is much more mature and more of an adult game, instead of Fable 3 really being more of a teenage game that just has adult interactions. Baldur's Gate 3's patch 5 is now available. We already talked about that. Leica Age Through Blood launches December 5th for the PS4 and PS5, and then for the Xbox One and Series, same day, and then January 11th for the Switch, which the PC launch is already out, though, and it is overwhelmingly positive as Metroidvania, so we'll go ahead and put that on the wish list instead. Turnip Boy Robs a Bank has been delayed to January 18th of 2024, which I think we are going to continuously see Turnip Boy games, and we're going to continuously see delays. RE4 Remake free DLC VR mode for PlayStation VR or the PS VR 2 launches December 8th. Dieselpunk inspired city builder new side goal for PC launches in early access on January 18th. It's a very brown looking game they have there. Let's see. Ludo Demo The Choice is now available for the PS5. Rydo is apparently a psychological drama that I probably just ignored when it first seen. Xbox Game Pass has added Remnant 2, SteamWorld Build, Far Cry 6, and more in early December. So it is going to add them. Check out the full list on Gamatsu if you're interested. A Fury demake called The Chain is now available for PC. The free demake of the Fury's first boss fight. Recently played Fury, so it would make a decent sense to play the demake and see if I can schedule the two together. Although the first boss fight in particular is not a particularly interesting boss fight for Fury, and Fury has some major problems, and it is too difficult, and it's not really long enough. It doesn't have enough bosses. So yeah, and beating it on easy is effectively not really beating the game at all, which is all I could manage to accomplish. You're missing out on content by not beating it on harder modes, and you're missing out on content by not buying the DLC and playing in a completely different way, which is apparently easier, I suspect, to play as with the DLC outfit. Let's see, Eldrand is now for the Xbox One and Series. It was previously for the Switch, PC, and iOS and Android. Which, yep, it's already on my wish list. Famitsu sales have been updated for the 20th through the 26th. Let's get a general concept here. Nintendo Switch taking the top 8. Like a Dragon Gaiden taking the 9th spot. Nintendo Switch taking the remainder until 13 for Like a Dragon for the PS5, and then Nintendo Switch taking the remainder until 20 with Call of Duty Modern Warfare. As far as new listings, Stray is way down in 24th position for the PS5. Hardware sales, though, still seem to be fairly strong for the PlayStation 5, despite the fact that game and disc sales are not particularly strong. I imagine we're just setting into a pattern here in which we'll see strong Xbox Series X sales and strong PlayStation 5 sales, and relatively speaking strong PlayStation 5 sales and Xbox sales. Seems like the Japanese audience is very much into buying hardware at the moment. A game called Hardcore Mecha is coming to Xbox One on December 14th. It's currently already available for PC, Switch, and PlayStation. Is that 4? Yes. Yeah. Really don't know what to do today. I'm in a weird position. Probably need to stand up and just stretch out and exercise a little bit. Might make a lot of sense. Demon Slayer Kimetsu no Yaiba Sweep the Board launches April 25th in Japan. This is a Switch exclusive game. It looks like it's a board game of some sort, probably like Mario Party to some level. Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis for PC launches December 7th. We already talked about that, but I'll go ahead and pop it up and put it all on the same window. Dark Light is coming to the PS4 and PS5 on January 30th. It's already mixed reviewed. Some people aren't really enjoying it. And then the sound novel 5 Fun Go Ni whatever has been announced for Switch. Not sure what a sound novel really is, per se. Kind of feels like it's a The game features 100 original stories with unique graphics and sounds, described as sometimes fun, other times scary. Each story can be completed in 5 minutes and ends with an unexpected twist. Interesting. So it's like a combination of mini stories in one big anthology. Which, yeah, there has always been this kind of weirdness around what you could put on a lot of mobile platforms and what you could get away with making and experimenting with. This definitely feels like this is a case where somebody has taken a bunch of short stories and put it on the Switch, which the Japanese are going to be much more accepting for than a Western audience if it was to come to the West, but I wouldn't be surprised if it actually doesn't ever come to the West. You know what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna take just a moment to stand up and try and stretch my legs, jump around a little bit, see if I can get some blood flowing. 1 second. Okay, I'm back. That's an odd break, but honestly, probably not a terrible idea if every hour I did just stand up and stretched a little bit in between these streams. That is something that probably should be a notice that pops up on YouTube videos and streams anyways, is that everybody should just stand up and stretch. Yeah. What I don't want to do, as we look at the GameDeveloper.com articles here, which I think we've probably covered them all, is drink a 5-hour energy drink right now, because I don't want to stay awake for 5 more hours, nor do I really, can I justify drinking that poison when it is so bad on me mentally and physically. I heard somewhere around either 400 or 800 milligrams of caffeine is a really unsafe amount of caffeine to drink. Well, a 5-hour energy drink, extra strength, is like 2,600 milligrams of caffeine, I'm pretty sure. It is way, way too much caffeine, which, yeah, you can definitely feel it. I wouldn't recommend it except for in absolute emergencies. You're going to fall asleep driving behind a wheel and you can't pull over to the side and sleep, which would be the better move, even in that situation. Let's see. Nintendo aspires to bring Xbox Game Pass to Nintendo and PlayStation. There's really no reason, though, that Nintendo and PlayStation themselves versus Apple and Google would open up their platforms, or would be forced to open up their platforms without Microsoft being forced to open up their same platforms anyways. Which, in all fairness, if it was something like the European Union that said PlayStation and Microsoft and Nintendo all had to open up their own, allow other marketplaces and other storefronts on their consoles. I can see Microsoft and Nintendo working very well there, with Microsoft games coming to the Switch when they can, and the Nintendo games coming to the Microsoft Xbox Series X. PlayStation, however, would not benefit much at all from that. A few PlayStation exclusives maybe then would go to Microsoft, whereas Microsoft could flood PlayStation with other games and Microsoft exclusives and come out in a much better position because of that. And honestly, if the EU did pull a ruling that said each of the game consoles did have to open up to other marketplaces, I wouldn't be surprised if Sony immediately just left the console business completely and said, no, we're not doing that. We'll just stop selling PlayStations in the EU or stop selling PlayStations altogether. And I could see Nintendo making the same decision, because Nintendo almost certainly wants to have very tight controls, whether or not they're actually enacting the tight controls at the moment as to what games can and can't be on the Nintendo Switch. Although they've been fairly open-minded lately, they haven't been in the past. And then Dan Houser's Absurd Ventures has 2 transmedia projects. I think we talked about this in the previous stream. One being a graphic novel, and one being a rock star, or what was it, an audio drama? Yeah, audio fiction. Neither one really video game related. And that normally would bring us to the fall list cleanup, but we still are very much running into a situation where the fall list is just not opening. The good news is I did program that macro to work somewhat. It takes longer than it probably should to realize that there aren't any games on the fall list loaded up, but it does move on. So I didn't have to manually go through the whole process of opening all the new games on Steam, which we'll go through these hopefully as fast as possible. Hopefully we'll run into long runs of fairly boring games. This quest giver might be something, so I'll give it a chance. Plus, if my macro is running correctly, this should take me to where I want to go, but it honestly doesn't feel like it is. It's moving to the right every time I middle click. I don't know if that's because the right is the last thing I interacted with or what. It should be moving to the left. Here we have our first adult game. It's more of a Western style 2D animated game called Late Night Delivery, the Bewitched Collection. 2 blue-haired witch ladies, one with giant breasts, one with just large breasts, in a visual novel style of gameplay. It looks like it's selling for $3.59, which feels fairly expensive for what it seems to be delivering. I just don't think there's probably much content there. Let's see. So if this is a case where every time I'm clicking it's taking me back to the right, I'll go to the left and we'll see what happens there. Time loop here. It's just a platformer, so no. Goofy gorillas. Yeah, I don't think there's quite enough of a visual polish here to say yes to that. Cannon fodder. Give that a chance. die in the dungeon, I'll give a chance to. Let's see. Orc Survivor is just a survivor's game, so I'm gonna say no to that. In fairness, this dungeon game may be somewhat close to dice dungeons, or dicey dungeons, whatever the game was I covered 4 or 5 months ago. Spent a lot of time on. Didn't get anywhere as far as I would have liked it to get, as far as finishing all the different levels. Guildmeister doesn't look visually polished enough. William and Sly Classic Collection. Is this some old game? I have no idea. I'll give it a chance, I guess, since it might be an old game of some nostalgia, even though I don't recognize it. Yeah. Still very much feels like it's taking me back to the tab that I last had clicked on, which maybe the plugin just doesn't work, or maybe it's just mislabeled. Lo-fi katakana, or katana. We'll give that a chance. Here we have another 2D, more Western style adult game called Sexy Strippers, which is just ladies stripping, although a lot of screenshots have them pole dancing, fully nude, which, yeah, I just don't think that actually happens, to be totally bottomless and on a pole. But whatever, it is a fantasy game like any game is. Apparently there's 2D puzzles to get to the images. It's selling for $1.79. It supports English in the interface. Again, a game I suspect that doesn't have that much content on it, although in this case I would say that the animation is much higher quality than the previous game, so for the lower price of $1.79 it's much more justifiable. Of course, your mileage is going to vary somewhat depending on whether or not you actually care about strippers or want to see stripping. Here's terrible animation, so we can say no to that. We'll just continue to try and burn through all the games. Just the tower defense game. Don't even really have anything to say here, and I'm again just lulling myself into near falling asleep while setting up. I will say, and this is just a prediction, that in 2024 we will potentially see YouTube crack down on more of its people trying to dodge the algorithm censoring it, people saying the phrase unalive, people putting different words in the subtitles on screen versus what is actually being said out loud. I do suspect that we will see that happen. Here we have a Walking Dead Destinies game, and we kind of had already heard and known that it was terrible, and the mixed reviews seem to agree with that, but I will make a YouTube short on it, and thus put it on the follow list, even though I definitely would not have bothered to. I wouldn't really bother to play it or purchase it. I almost want to say yes to this because of this one screenshot, so I'm going to be generous and say yes to this, although arguably I probably shouldn't be that generous and shouldn't instead be much more cruel. I'm starting on the left and then working my way back to the right until I get to a point where I've already seen something. That is somewhat working, but not really working. See, I'm already all the way to the left. Here we have a Boy and His Blob retro collection. Maybe it's a case. Well, I'm misinterpreting how the game... No, because then it just went to the right. I was thinking maybe it goes just to the tab that is in the left of the 10 tabs that are clickable at the moment. It doesn't actually scroll all the way to the very left. This racing game doesn't look quite polished enough. If anything, it feels very reminiscent of the Canandara Jet Girls game, which I felt like there was a decent amount of advertisement around that with a spin-off anime. It's funny how none of that really led to any level of success for them. But yeah, this Backrooms game weirdly is introducing another character in the co-op horror game. So we have what I suspect is a non-English language game, which is already on the follow list for some reason. So I'm going to go ahead and take it off the follow list just because it doesn't support English. I don't like this clay animation look, so I'm gonna say no to it. Maybe that's being a little too picky. Try my very, very best to burn through these games as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, that's pretty much all this segment has become, though, is just me talking about how I'm rushing. And maybe I shouldn't be rushing. Let's see. Yeah. Let's see, we have another adult game here. It's a 3D CGI game, but I would say that the CGI is actually fairly cartoony and bright and colorful compared to the usual 3D CGI models. It's called Living Dolls Rebirth Alpha, and it says it's a fantasy adult world, and it kind of does look like it is attempting to be an MMO RPG style adult game, although a lot of asset flipping certainly would be necessary to accomplish that, and honestly I just don't know if they really would accomplish anything. Now it is a alpha free to play at the moment. It says it has English with full audio support and subtitles. The question certainly would come down to just how much they support a game like this, and yeah, a game like this potentially could get fairly large numbers of support, or it could be abandoned very quickly. Here you can see the 3D CGI models are a little bit brighter, a little bit more colorful, and particularly in this green hair with this background. Let's see. We have another adult game, so yeah, it does seem like adult games are just coming fast and furious and consistently. This one is called My Tsundere Femboy. I'm not sure if Japanese would ever use the phrase tsundere to describe a femboy, but whatever. This is a 2D comic book style animation visual novel of just this main femboy character, really, for $1.99 English interface and subtitles. It says it has approximately 2,000 words, which is fairly low, and it's selling for $1.99. I feel like this Dr. Psycho series is a horror game series that I don't think ever really sells. It looks very asset flippy, so I'm going to say no to it. And then Sanguinivore 20 below. I'll give a chance to that. I don't know if that's the real way you pronounce that word. Pinned. Looks like nothing. Shape. Looks like nothing. Tunnet. Looks like nothing. DVR simulator. Looks like nothing. Escape Mono. Looks like an escape the room game of an uninteresting level of polish. This too looks like garbage. Just asset flip, if not stolen from the internet, images of lions. Cartoony lions. Mutation Madness. Might be something. Might be very close to the end here. Let's see. Dark Light. Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis. Fury Remake. Those are all tabs we opened before. Ludo. New Cycle. Under a Rock. Unrailed. Yep. So if I hit a point where I'm going to the right and I see games that aren't on the fall list, then those are new games to look at. If I go all the way to the right, which we have about, it feels like 10 games from Gamatsu that we opened up tabs for. And yeah. It does feel like we're closer to the end than it would seem. I think this one doesn't need another YouTube short. We'll close that tab. There's the end of show tab early, which means I just turned off the auto blur, which I'll have to be careful going forward. I'll just quickly, hopefully, hope that there aren't too many adult games, and it's just going to keep going back to the left to end of show. Yep. Here we have an adult game. OMG Non-Letter Isekai visual novel, which honestly, these screenshots may not be inappropriate to show. Yeah, there's not really a screenshot. This is the most adult only screenshot in the whole game. $5.94, English interface and subtitles. All characters are between 20 and 25. It does say it has adult content in it. They just didn't bother to make any screenshots for it. Let's give this a follow and see how that goes. Then we have another adult game called Slave Corporation, which looks like it is an RPG maker game with the one 2D anime office lady with purple hair. It's selling for $7.99. It says it supports English, Japanese, and Chinese in the interface and subtitles. It seems like it's probably a little too expensive at that price. Like $7.99 is way too expensive, really. It should be closer to $3.99. Hello Parade here. Some kind of tower defense game. That doesn't look terrible. Different spin on tower defense. Brush Burial. We'll give that a chance. Then we have yet another adult game, Crony and the Assassin's Mission, the Teddy Bear Payment. That's a weird title. 2D anime character lady. And then a bunch of RPG maker stuff. $6.79, English, Japanese, traditional, and simplified Chinese in the interface and subtitles. I wonder if we're perhaps seeing the beginning of adult games, or Japanese publishers realizing that they no longer have to censor their adult games on Steam, and that is why in part we're seeing a larger amount of games being released. It's a possibility. And we have a 3D CGI game called Joy Life 3, which they call a casual flop game, which I assume is a match 2 card game. Weirdly, it's not in the adult section, when I would suspect that there is actually some adult content in it. Yes, it does have a free adult patch, but otherwise you just have these 3D CGI Chinese ladies. And then here you can see the real game. $2.79 Japanese full audio with English, Chinese, Russian, and traditional Chinese and Korean language support. Weirdly, it is very positive, so cheap and just straight to the point. I think probably works very well for the audience that they're targeting. a game like Epic Pizza. Looks like absolute garbage, so that's going to be no. Our Dear Kingdom doesn't look interesting. And then we have another 2D adult game called Gentle Female Boss, 2D anime lady. Feels very similar to another game we've already seen today. This one is $1.19. Oddly, it says it has full audio for Chinese and subtitles for Chinese, but not interface for Chinese. It also has interface and subtitles for English. Says it has approximately 30,000 words, which is a decent enough amount of words. Here we have an Only Up clone. Still seeing occasional ones of those. Here we have a bunch of horror hallways. And something called Pestilence. Give that a chance. Gotta say no to this game. And no to this game. And no to that game. We have a game called Lewd Cell, which looks like it's probably a, well, it's a Metroidvania game where you have a 2D lady seeming like she is fighting monsters and getting captured and tortured in explicit ways when she captures monsters. We're seeing more games that are actual games like this that just have adult adult content throughout it. A lot of times in the lose scenarios like this, where you get adult content as you get caught and lose, which it's an interesting idea certainly. The game is a little expensive though, I would say, at $7.99. It's English interface and subtitles. I wouldn't be surprised if it is actually a very small game too. But yeah, I do appreciate the idea potentially that a Metroidvania game could have adult content in it and be good. There's no inherent reason why it couldn't. Yeah, say no to Nightscape City. Then no the cat on the desktop. Then probably no to Family Arcade. Yep. Probably no to the Forgotten Night. Yeah, I'll put this on the fall list. If I'm at a point now, however, where I never really can do any fall list cleanup, it does create this weird situation where putting something on the fall list but not making a YouTube short, which is what I just decided to do, doesn't make any sense at all, because I can't go back to the fall list and check. Here we have another adult game called GARM, G-A-R-M-M Adventure Volume 1. This looks like very poorly hand-drawn Western animation ladies in a very poorly visually polished RPG. It's selling for $3.99. Says it supports 12 languages in interface and subtitles. I question some of that, but yeah, not to a level of polish I would say yes to. Here we have a tower defense game that's not visually polished enough in this interface to say yes to. Then we're back to this point and this point, which means we are done, I believe. Let me just double check. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna call that done. It feels like we've, in particular, opened up about 20 tabs today. That's quite a lot, but not as many as it could have been. Anyways, that's going to be it for the stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to support me further, there's a link down below in the description box. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.